Mary Catherine Ham, Brian Wilson, Brian Neiman, today's newsmakers, and you, the Morning Majority. 105.9 FM, AM 630, WMAL.
7:07 on a Monday morning with the Morning Majority. Brian Neiman, Mary Catherine Ham. Brian Wilson has a couple of days off. We've got Trevor Manich coming up about a half hour from now. We'll get into the Redskins' loss yesterday, and it appears the John Beck era will begin in Washington, D.C. Tucker Carlson about an hour from now. But right now on the phone, Joe DiGenova, our legal expert, joins us. We've been talking a lot about Occupy Wall Street and the protesters that are, refusing to leave. Pretty much these property, well, in New York may be a different case than here in D.C., but in New York, for sure, the property owners have a right to say to these guys, hey, you got to leave, and call the cops in, and the cops are supposed to just take them off, right?
That is correct. And now Zuccotti Park, where all of this started, is actually owned by Brookfield Office Properties, which is a private company in New York, and they initially wanted the park cleared for cleaning, quote unquote, but then backed off after they said they got pressure from local political leaders. The bottom line is this: Rudy Giuliani put it best when he said that Mayor Bloomberg had made a terrible mistake, which is you do not let people live and sleep in parks. The minute you've done that, that's the broken glass theory of municipal control. Once you do that, that is a broken window right now in New York, and what's going to come next is not going to be pretty.
Because ultimately you think there's going to be an even bigger protest or a bigger conflict between...
Ultimately, Mayor Bloomberg, Mr. Nicey Nice, I mean, you talk about a goofball sometimes. Bloomberg is going to have to clear that park eventually for sanitation reasons. By the way, we had this problem back in the 1980s here in D.C., in Lafayette Park, and there was a Supreme Court case in which the Supreme Court ruled that sleep is not speech. Remember the old Community for Creative Nonviolence and Mitch Snyder?
Yes, I remember Mitch Snyder very well.
That's right. Sure. They occupied Lafayette Park, and eventually the park police removed them, and the Supreme Court ruled that sleeping is not speech, and you got to get out when the cops say you got to get out.
All right, so that was going to be my second question. Is there any difference here in D.C. where we have protesters all the time hanging out at Lafayette Park or McPherson Square? If they have a permit, they can stay, but I guess you're saying that's not necessarily true.
They have a permit. They can stay during the day as long as they don't violate the law and as long as they clean up when they leave. But as soon as they stay, they cannot sleep in the park. They can't stay there overnight. They are not allowed to sleep. They can walk through the park at night, but, in New York, see, that's a piece of private property in New York. It's entirely different. But once the owner makes up his mind or her mind that they want it cleared, then the police have the right to come in and move it. Here, we do everything by permit, and it's all done by the Park Service because all these parks are owned by the federal government.
Right. Well, so Friday there was some Friday night news dumps from the Obama administration. Let's go into this Uganda combat troops thing. There was a law of sorts passed by...
A resolution. Right, a sense of Congress urging the administration to intervene and send a few people over. So the president has this patina of congressional approval, and he's gone out of his way to make it clear that these are not combat troops, although in recognition of the error they made in Somalia, they had the right of self-defense, which troops did not have in Somalia, even though it's a humanitarian mission. So they can kill, but they have to do so nicely.
Well, and where does the patina give the troops the authorization to operate? Because the terrorists that we're fighting, the insurgents we're fighting, operate in 4 different countries.
This is a political question which has been answered by several conservative Republican senators who have said they swimmingly approve of this. And so in the absence of a division between the parties, this will go on unabated with or without constitutional authority to do so. This is where we are. I mean, this one apparently had bipartisan support because this particular little small army of rapists and murderers has drawn the ire of both sides of the aisle. So the president gets a pass on this one until American troops start dying.
Right, until something bad happens.
But don't you find it strange that the whole thing was no boots on the ground in Libya, and here overnight, all of a sudden we got 100 boots on the ground in...
Listen, Brian, there is so much cognitive dissonance in this administration. No waterboarding, but let's assassinate everybody from a drone. I mean, you cannot believe the cognitive dissonance coming out of this administration on foreign policy and military deals. I mean, it is endless.
Also on Friday, we found out the Class Act which was a component of the Obamacare bill, which is supposed to save us a ton of money, Joe.
Yes.
That turns out not.
$86 billion in savings. Yes, the administration described this part of the law as unworkable. Those of us who watched it from the beginning thought it was delusional. What you have here is they said this was good. This was a voluntary program where people could get long-term care, which included all kinds of things like hiring a home caregiver to assist with basic tasks, non-medical needs, a house wheelchair. You could actually have construction done on your house to make it wheelchair accessible. But then nobody was going to join this, they figured out, because the premiums would go so high that people would not want to join. And so as a result, there were not enough healthy people joining, so they dropped the program. And yet, as a result of that, of course, they lost $86 billion in savings, and now they have to figure out how they're going to make that up. Well, of course, they're not going to make it up because the Obamacare is beyond belief one of the biggest frauds ever committed on the American people. But, you know, this is what happens when you have a slim majority.
You can just drop portions of a law if you want to?
Well, it actually was enacted in such a way that if it was not feasible, the law actually said that they had the authority to do it.
Okay.
It doesn't say that about any other of the provisions, however.
Okay. Just the class one. So legally they've done nothing wrong here.
No. They had every right to do this, and thank God they did it.
All right. I wanted to ask you, we had a lot of calls on what D.C. is doing when it comes to putting people behind bars or taking them downtown and booking them for driving with expired tags.
Right.
Now, the mayor says, hey, this is on the books. It's something we did back in the day when we were trying to fight, drug dealers.
Right.
Legally, is he right? Because it is a law that allows them to, I think, up to 30 days in jail.
That's correct. Yeah, actually, the mayor is correct. This is the law on D.C. books, which was enacted to assist police in enforcement when we had PCP out on, you remember the PCP epidemic, and then it was crack cocaine.
Right.
And the police were using this as a methodology once they had a legal right to stop, to take people into custody and do car searches. I think this law probably has outlived its usefulness in a modern era. Most states do not require arrest or permit arrest for expired tags. I think D.C. probably is going to have either do this or have it imposed by Congress, actually. It's on the books, so the D.C. Council has to repeal it, and it's up to them. But it is lawful for them to do this. I think it's a horrible public policy with all the problems they have. The last thing you need is basically law-abiding citizens locked up taking up space. I mean, it's just basically stupid and bad public policy.
But that was my feeling as well, though. Originally, the idea was, hey, we pull somebody over, they got suspended plates, and the police officers thinking, this guy's up to a little bit more than just having suspended plates.
Correct.
Let's take him in and let's talk to him a little bit further so we can find out if he's dealing drugs or if he's a gang member or something like that.
That's exactly what it was intended for, and that's the way it went. But by the way, and if I may just change the subject for 1 second, that Herman Cain interview with David Gregory yesterday. Do you watch David Gregory regularly? Do you notice how aggressive and antipathetic he is to Republicans? It's amazing. He would never use that tone with a Democrat. Last week, Rahm Emanuel was on, and David Gregory asking him all these questions about Move On Chicago, this great new program that he has going. Not a question about Solyndra that Emanuel was right in the middle of.
Ron, where did you get that awesome shirt?
Not one word about Solyndra. But if you're a Republican, first of all, David Gregory obviously doesn't understand what a state sales tax is.
Right.
No.
I mean, talk about an outrageous interview.
It was pretty funny. I'm glad we played it. All right, Joe, as always, we appreciate your time and your insights.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Joe.
Joe DiGenova, our legal expert here with the Morning